Welcome to The Scoop, our podcast, vlog, whatever you would want to call this.
You can call it whatever you want, but it's happening.
It's happening.
Finally happening.
We are recording for the first time. We've been talking about this for a while, but we're making it happen. Surprisingly enough, I realized that between the two of us, we have more than 30 years of experience in student ministry. So you've got like one or two, and then I'm old.
Yeah.
So our goal is to take 5 to 10 minutes with tips or tools or just thoughts that we have to help students and really all people follow Jesus together, as that's the goal of the church. And so, so we are starting a new year and things get busy real quick, real busy, really quick. And I'm sure you're probably already experiencing that. And so as we jump into a new year, we want to ask, how do I keep the most important things the most important things? And so all sorts of things will call for our attention, will fight for our focus. And so how do we recognize what's the most important? How do we keep it there? And so we want to take a couple minutes just to talk about that. So we believe it's important to identify and set your priorities and then fight to protect them. So you do this in a marriage, that you would fight to keep your spouse as important. And so hopefully as we go on, neither one of us has kids yet, but I would look and say, like, I need to keep my relationship with my wife as more important than my relationship with my kids. When I got married, or when I started dating, I started going to a lot less sporting activities for students. And
you get a new built-in, when anybody asks you to do something, you know, it's usually like, you don't want to commit right away. You know, that's just like how it is. I don't know what's wrong with people. It's like you wait around to see if something better comes or whatever, but now you have that built-in, well, I have to ask my wife. I got to ask Becky, ask Maddie. And so, that helps.
I used to go to games 3 or 4 times a week. Just like I could watch TV at home alone, or I could go to a game. And so I chose to go to a game. And
probably
now
a healthy thing to do.
It's probably, that was a healthy thing to do. And now it's a healthy thing for me to say, I can only make maybe 1 game per student a year, just to say I can't come to all of your games, but we're going to try to make it out to some. But, so a couple questions. How do we set our priorities and how do we figure that out? But first question for you is, how important is church involvement for your family? So where does church fall in for your list of priorities? And I think people are all over the place on that as far as where church falls in when you talk about God and work or school, family, sports. I heard it said last year, or I read, I can read, but I read that it is hard to separate a loving relationship with God from loving his church and his family and being involved there. And so that really gave me a new perspective. I think so often I put my priorities as like God first, family second, work would come third, and then my church involvement would be kind of next. As if I think about my spaces of life, like your family space, your workspace, and then your church space would be like a third space, and then you would make room for a fourth space maybe, or hopefully, because I think we all need that space in our community.
Like a sport or a hobby or something.
Yeah. And so this really put in perspective that like church and God in a lot of ways can be equal. And that if I want to love God, then I have to love God's people. And if I'm going to love God's people, I need to be connected with them, consistently connected and committed to being there. And that's a difficult thing and a tough thing.
I mean, it comes back to that whole balance of up in and out. You know, it's not just the up relationship with God, but we need each other. We need our in relationship with one another.
Yeah, which is why we also still need that fourth space, because we need that out relationship as well. And so it's not being here all the time, and we're not asking for that. And so there is that balance. But one thing that I've learned and recognized, that it's hard for any parent to kind of establish a priority for their kids that isn't a priority for them.
Yeah.
I think another good question to ask is, if church involvement or my relationship with God isn't where I want it to be, how do I set priorities?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things when it comes to setting priorities and figuring out like what are they in your life, and you know, this is pretty basic stuff. This isn't something that we came up with, but look at your life a year from now. Where do you want to be a year from now? You know, write it down. Where do you want to be 5 years from now? Write it down. Where do you want to be 10 years, 50 years from now? And then see like those big priorities that you have that you want to be a part of your life 50 years from now or 10 years from now. how do those mesh with your short-term goals and priorities, and how do you balance all that out?
Yeah, there's a great book by Andy Stanley called Principle of the Path. It's talking about that. If you're looking farther down the road, he says a path leads where a path leads. And if where you want to end up, you need to start taking the steps to get there. I know so often sports are different from when I was a kid because I'm older. It's real easy to get super invested into sports or dance or clubs and robotics. And there's so many things. Like we said earlier, like there's always things fighting for our attention. I've never heard a kid say, who continue to follow Jesus after high school, I never heard anyone say, I wish I was less involved at church.
Yeah.
We've seen more and more students be so happy when they said, when they dropped something so that they could actually commit to the community of Christ.
Yeah, I mean, we do, you know, our 8th grade goodbye and our senior sneak, where we get to kind of look back on their years as a student with us before they move on to the next thing. And constantly we hear students say, I wish that I had been able to do more stuff. I wish I'd been able to be more part of the group. And so
that's also definitely the pastor side.
Yeah,
because like the pastor side, and I guess I grew up that way, but the pastor side of me is like that church involvement is super important. And I think I wish that I would have, to me, I regret not being plugged into a church community even when I was in college and I was going to school to be a youth pastor. But I went to services and I went home, and that was good. And I went to church, but I wasn't part of a church, and I was part of a Christian community at a Christian college, but I still missed out. So how do you keep your priorities the main thing? Like I was always amazed with your family when you grew up that like you guys would show up in soccer uniforms when you guys came here. When you came here, you were in middle school.
Yeah.
I remember that. I was actually your leader, old man again. Like you would come in uniform, but you would stay through the message and like might take off right at the very end of service. And it was, what time's your game? Oh, it starts in 10 minutes. I was like, you don't have to be there. Like how are you still here?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a thing. And I remember, like, you know, a lot of times coaches would be like, you there a half hour, an hour before the game. And my parents being like, oh, we'll be there at game time if it was on a Sunday. And yeah, I mean, I probably didn't, you know, love that when I was a kid, but now looking back, and I was texting with my parents about it today, and I was like, I was really thankful that they had those priorities and they set those rules. And there was, like I said, there was definitely times when we missed for tournaments or for big games or for away games or whatever, but there was finding that balance and making sure that church wasn't getting missed in the midst of everything else that we had going on.
For me, reading my Bible, I set aside time where this happens every day. It was one of the streaks that I was most proud of on my phone. Like everybody's got like their snap streak, and mine actually was
YouVersion streak.
My YouVersion streak, it was finally broken, and I was disappointed. I missed a day about a month ago, and I was over 500 days in a row reading my Bible and missed one, which was like every day when I woke up, that's what I did, just to make that a priority, and nothing got in the way of it. Until one day when I slept in and then just was like, oh, I gotta get moving. So
yeah, we all only have so much time in life. We have so much stuff competing for our time. There's always going to be that choice of deciding what do I have time for and what's going to get cut, and it's finding a healthy balance of that. And yeah.
So you have to decide for yourself what your priority is going to be. Set those up for individually as students, but also for families. And this is a huge developmental time. And this is a part of formulating who you are. And so I was really glad that my parents instilled that you're a follower of Jesus first, and then so many other things come after that. So we hope that, like, our prayers that your desire and your family desire is to walk with Jesus as best as you can. And we hope that the priority is being a part of being here, both Sundays, Wednesdays, when we meet, when we gather. It's a great time to encourage each other. But yeah,
I think that's going to wrap us up for today. Thanks for watching. Again, if you have an idea of something you'd like to hear us talk about, or just questions or whatever, feel free to reach out to us, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, and hopefully they won't be as long. I'm sure we got a little chatty this time.
That was 5 minutes, right?
Probably was more than 5 minutes, but yeah, 10 to 15.
Yeah. All right, we'll see you guys.
Bye.